Good afternoon. Hi, Rob. How are you?
Good. Hi, Margaret. How are you?
Good. I'm very good. We'd like to welcome everyone. Thank you for a couple of minutes of patience to our LinkedIn Live RegTech for iGaming and sports betting. As we know, in the United States, sports betting has just become legal in the last few years. And as that industry is taking off, every state is starting to introduce different kinds of technology regulation to kind of catch up with the legalization of the gaming platforms themselves. We're seeing this kind of regulation happen in Canada, starting with Ontario in this past April. We're anticipating that this is happening in Latin America. And from what we're talking to from our clients and those in the industry, it's creating quite a lot of turmoil of how to stay compliant while creating still a great user experience and maximizing revenue. And so we're joined today. I'm Margaret, the head of marketing here at MIRACL, with Rob, CEO. And we just wanted to talk about some of these regulations, some of the ways that we're seeing this can potentially harmfully be harmful to the businesses, and then equally what are some solutions and other ideas. And then we are totally biased and have one solution in mind that can help, but we'll present a few ways that you can look at this and end with a demo. At any time, please feel free to put comments or questions into the live stream, and we will do the best to answer you either in real time here today or answering later on the stream. So, Rob,
Yes.
As mentioned, there's lots of different legislation happening. The latest that we saw was in Pennsylvania in the United States, because each of the legislation happened state by state. And there was only a couple weeks notice to bring this in. Can you tell us a bit about just what's the background of this sort of legislation? How is it being adopted? Paint the scene for us, if you will.
Okay, a little bit of scene painting. So I'm first off, to start, there are probably 30 states in the US where gambling is currently permitted. Obviously, that's excluding Canada, which, as you mentioned, is sort of spearheaded by Ontario. But you've got to consider that in the North Americas. And probably the most stringent of those states is New Jersey. And they were the first to really mandate MFA, and I suppose they did so firstly just to prevent the account takeover aspect, because they are fundamentally seeking to give assurances to residents of that state that their well-being and online security is being taken seriously. And then obviously secondly, to ensure that actually the user playing is really the one that's authorized. And so New Jersey for some time has had the highest revenue per state because it's not that populous. There's a pretty high prospect of other states overtaking them. But since they have really been the, if you like, the leader, they've really been at the vanguard of the sort of legislative evolution here. There have been probably 7 states that have said, maybe 7 or 8, that have said that they will follow New Jersey's lead, of which Pennsylvania is one. And so that's why Pennsylvania has, just adopted this MFA. The reality is that there will be a bunch of others following suit. It's very hard to kind of call when that will happen, but we talk to, like Colorado or other states, and indeed I should point out there are a bunch of states that are also just newly introducing gaming legislation, and so they may hop almost directly to this kind of higher level of security. But really what's happened is that prior to the legislation, there was a requirement for gaming operators to offer MFA as an option. And that was typically, although not exclusively, but in 90% of instances, that was SMS. Mm-hmm. And so because the adoption of that when it was voluntary was very, very low, it's fair to say that it hadn't really been optimized, and therefore the sort of user flow and the experience probably wasn't as smooth as it could be, because there was probably only 4, 5, 6% of users that were actually had selected MFA or that 2FA option.
Okay.
And so what we're now seeing is that because these regulators are introducing this legislation at fairly short notice, operators are switching that default to just make it mandatory for all incoming traffic. And so that is that's really the opportunity, because right now they have got to figure out how best they can now optimize that. And I will point out one other thing as well, which is we've seen a dent on user experience, and I'm sure we'll come on to talk about that. But actually, we've also seen a little bit of surprising kind of poor performance in terms of accounts being taken over that are actually being protected with 2FA, SMS 2FA. So there are definite misgivings in terms of SMS 2FA not doing its job, both from the point of view of user experience and also security. So I guess it's down to operators to take in the learnings from this new regulation and figure out what is the best solution in both of those two regards, user experience and security.
And I think with that in mind, we'll get back to SMS in a moment, but all of this legislation is coming in because passwords are awful, right? They are clunky, and it's something that we've all gotten used to, and it's something that you take for granted. How much it gets in your life, gets in the way of your life. I think there's a recent study that says 10% of Brits will reset a password every single day. So can you imagine your to-do list, brush your teeth, get dressed, reset a password? That's not great. So can you talk a little bit, first of all, like what the insecurity of passwords? I know we have opinions about like LastPass, which was this password manager, has gotten taken. So to me, this is probably the source of why multi-factor authentication kind of regulations coming in, because we're invariably insecure to start with. No?
For sure. Look, I mean, I think the number of ways in which passwords are failing both operators and users is probably too long to go through in this call. The short summary is that they're 60 years old, believe it or not. And in that time, you may have noticed the internet has evolved somewhat. And given the fact that the irony is that by making the requirement of passwords more complex, users are then reusing those complex passwords more, which essentially has pretty much given rise to a whole industry, I should say a multi-billion-dollar industry of brute force hackers who are just using those hack credentials to basically try and hack accounts on the basis that people are going to reuse those. And as you say, the consumer has really had the worst deal of all, because in the absence of any other option, they've resorted to password managers as a security tool. And we've seen with the announcement of Norton LifeLock, which is the former name, the name of Symantec formerly, and then LastPass, both announcing hacks. And in the case of LastPass, actually, a breach of the source code. It's just very evident that the password managers as a concept, as a story, are fatally flawed. I think that that's a long debate, but when you see some of the sort of suspect practices that have been used in those, it's pretty evident that even the most strong advocate of password managers must now think that they are very doubtful as to their kind of viability going forward. So look, passwords are just incredibly easy to hack. incredibly vulnerable. There's a whole industry out there, that is basically dedicated to exploiting those weaknesses. The legislation to bring about multi-factor authentication is not a coincidence. It's coming in force to the industry and to protect the consumer and prevent account takeover en masse, and it will be global. So operators really need to get their head around that.
Because if we think about the kind of data that is held in like a sports bettor's wallet, right? It's all very sensitive and needs to be protected, right? We're going through that. We did announce this week that we have partnered with Salsa Technology. They are a large operator who see the advantages of single-step MFA for their users, but are also in a proactive move because they see that Brazil will also, we believe that there'll be regulation coming this year to kind of start with Latin America as well. As you mentioned, the ecosystem was people had passwords. Well, the ecosystem was this has become legal. People use passwords to get into their wallets. Here's an option in the back, which was SMS. The legislation's come on, they've turned it on. And then SMS is not really great for lots of different reasons. We did see yesterday that there was a hack of T-Mobile in the US's mobile network. Quite a few Google Fi credentials were stolen as far as like serial numbers. It's now going to be very easy for millions of people to be phished. That's very alarming for those of us who rely on Google for quite a lot of things. So having one ecosystem is makes it a bit nervous. But yeah, tell us why SMS is not going to be ideal for this specific industry, just to turn on that default that they might have had running.
Yeah, sure. So look, there are really two issues, and we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that SMSs serve people well because it's sort of so universally understood for a long time. But because it's reached a level of adoption, I guess it's really being exploited very severely for all of the security vulnerabilities that we talked about. And it's also, by the way, a process that has just so many elements that can go wrong. And that's because you can fail to copy down the one-time passcode correctly, you fail to get the SMS message, you fail to have your mobile with you, you fail to receive it in a timely fashion, maybe you haven't got mobile reception. And there are just too many requirements, as it were. If you look at the single atomic requirements for each and every kind of authentication to go through, there are just so many that can come unstuck. And that's why you see login success rates down at sort of, well, we've actually seen some as low as 63%, I think is the lowest I've seen for a decent sized operator. So that means you've got, a whole huge number of users that sat at the front gate, unable to get in. Total disaster, right? But it's not just that. Even if you have 95% login success rate, which would be very high for SMS, very, very high indeed. So even if you have something that high, the reality is that the sheer amount of time that it takes and the kind of multiple steps involved mean that actually it also saps people's sort of impulse purchase desire. There's that friction and effort that actually gets in the way of people, particularly if they're second screening during a game and there's some time sensitive trade they want to put on. Having that then get in their way, it really just destroys the element of fun and impulse that actually operators are so reliant on to make their business super profitable and entertaining. So these are the considerations. Security on the one side, poor user experience, but that poor user experience is going to be so detrimental to the long-term profitability of the business, because it's not only reducing the amount of incoming traffic, but also the conversion rate of that traffic.
Mm-hmm. I want to get back to login success rate. We do have a question from Joanne asking about if we know about what other states aside from Pennsylvania are following New Jersey's MFA legislation lead, and how are we following this on our side. We can feel free to answer this. Also, Jen, feel free to follow our newsletter because we have quite a few different resources to try to stay atop of this. But Rob, over to you. There's quite a lot of a watch list, right? As far as we see.
Yeah, I think the simple answer is, without dodging the bullet here, I would say that it is something that is very hard to be precise on in terms of timing, and we are in touch with some of the kind of heads of those states, and there is a process that they're going through just in terms of formulating the legislation that is resulting in, even on their side, some degree of uncertainty. So, to be honest, I can pick up in detail with Joanne offline as to what we're currently seeing and who we think the protagonists are that are likely to switch. But in the context of operators' product cycles, they're really thinking probably on a sort of 3-6 month timescale about new product iterations and version introductions. And I think within that time frame, you've really got to be considering a very large number of states may potentially make this change, and so you will need to have that user flow optimized and ready baked for when it comes in. But yeah, the fact is that you can look on public record as to those states that have been supportive of New Jersey's legislation, and then you can take also a view on states like Maine and California, where they are Texas, where they haven't even introduced gaming yet. It's not even legal, but where they've clearly made it plain that they would be taking a fairly conservative approach with regard to security. So that's I'm afraid not to give you a kind of
watch this
answer, but the reality is it's pretty hard to predict which one's going to happen when.
I think what's interesting though too is that we saw in Pennsylvania happen in December, and in that same month, Ohio just went legal with betting. So it is that, as you say, they just announced this week that Texas sports betting didn't go through last year, but now it's about they're going to try again this year to make it legal. And as you say, where the places that are still making sports betting legal in the first place, and at that same time, will they bring in this security security measurements simultaneously, or will it be still in two different spaces? But we can sense that there's a tide that security is important. We need to value data. We need to value privacy. So you'd hope that these go hand in hand. You mentioned login success rate, which is something that we talk a lot about, but I'm not sure. So it feels very important and relevant to us. But I just can we take a moment to what does that really mean, and how can we encourage people to take a moment to measure their own, to see really how what an opportunity to simplify their login experience could be.
Yeah, sure. But thanks for pointing that out. So I was talking about login success rate. Really, that's the proportion of users that are attempting to access your site that are successful in doing so. And you'll be surprised at the number that are failing. And moreover, you'll be surprised at the number of operators that essentially don't have systems that tell them how well their users are authenticating into their site. Why do they not have those systems? It's basically because passwords have really been the only game in town for the last 50 years. And so you haven't really needed to measure the relative performance, but that's no longer the case, right? You've got lots of different potential solutions. So understanding the number of failures that are happening in the login process and where those originate from is super important, particularly in the context of a service that is entertaining and time sensitive. And I think that the long-term prognosis for online consumer entertainment is that user experience is going to be all important. And so you need to be, armed with a kind of sandbox environment where you can test that login success rate, particularly because even small changes to screen layout or button configuration can make a big difference. And when you consider how much time and effort is taken to optimize how well a user can onboard and process the sort of KYC requirements for their initial registration, we need to be thinking just as much, if not more, about the ongoing task of them safely and speedily authenticating into their account. And I mean, you said at the front, right at the top of the call, that we obviously have a kind of axe to grind. We may not be completely neutral in this matter, but when you think about it, there are really 3 requirements for an authentication solution, and I think very few people would argue with this. It's got to work everywhere. If it doesn't, you're going to get a huge number of support calls. Those support calls can not only be very expensive, but they can also threaten your license, because if your call center is jammed with people that are basically trying to log in, then those that want to self-exclude or actually are problem gamblers may not be able to reach the help, so that could be disastrous. So yeah, clearly the solution has to work everywhere. It's also got to improve your user experience from passwords, because no one can dispute that that's just a lousy user experience. So you've got to increase your login success rate from where it was with passwords. And then the solution needs to protect users and operators from every form of attack. And it's very clear. You've seen the announcements recently with BetMGM, FanDuel, DraftKings, all announcing forms of data breach in the last 60 days. It's very clear that this area is an absolute focal center for the hacking community. So when you look at those 3 requirements, we think that MIRACL really is uniquely well placed to provide those. Essentially, we work on any W3C browser. We have no form of requirement for hardware, so it can essentially work on any device. And then it's the fastest authentication in the world, so people love that as part of the user experience because it gets them where they want to be. It really is just straightforward as kind of one pin and you're in, or a biometric if that's available. And then lastly, it prevents every form of potential remote attack. So apologies for the plug, but that's, I guess, where we're coming from, and it's been really insightful and valuable kind of discussing that with operators, and their response has been fantastic.
Thanks. I think like what's inferred, but I'll just call out as far as like the user experience, all the multiple steps that you talked with the SMS. Super Bowl is just a couple of weeks away. It's one of the biggest sporting events, definitely in the United States, if not greater breast. And if we just take a moment to think about all of the people who might just on that one day be putting in bets and so forth, and consider all of the dynamics that take place on this very busy day of the year, to then have to remember a password, then do an SMS, or this other extra step, all these multiple steps when as you said,
too busy supporting the Chiefs or whatever.
Well, yeah, and so it's a matter of like how to best to do that. Well, I'm not going to apologize for the plug. I'm going to invite our CCO Michael Tanaka in now to kind of show what does single step multi-factor authentication MIRACL style look like, and then we can go from there. Hello.
Hi there. I love the idea of what does single step multi-factor look like. Here we go. I'm going to show you that.
We'll save that for the next one.
Oopsie. All right, a window. Here we go. Entire screen.
And as Michael's sharing his screen again, if there's any extra questions, please let us know. All right, we can see your screen.
Okay, so obviously we go around with the tagline, the login you love, and single-step multi-factor authentication, and that's because of what you're going to see exactly now. So if a user just open a browser, and in this case, actually I'll open a new one, what the heck. So I hit whatever site it is that I'm entering, I then do the typical thing, go for my login, but in this case, I just type in my PIN, and that's the entire job done in one step, taking approximately 2 seconds. And I'm going to slow that down a little bit so you can get a look at it again. So when I hit login, I've already got my identity established in this particular browser, and then I just have to type in my PIN, and I'm straight in there. And that's actually the equivalent of your username password coupled with an SMS OTP. So it meets the banking standards and also the gaming standards for multi-factor authentication. And because it's such a low friction process, we can use it in any action, any sort of critical action. So in this case, I'm buying into a game as an example. And what we can do is throw up the PIN pad for the user. And because they're typing in exactly the same PIN that they selected for the device, we have pretty much 100% success rate right there alone.
So Michael, thank you for that. You did say that this qualifies as both a password and an SMS, so forth, but do you mind walking us through a tiny bit slower, like how is this multi-factor authentication?
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because if I do something as simple as this, I'm going to launch an incognito window which hasn't been given a PIN, and I'm going to go into that same casino demo again. When I hit login, and this is what an attacker will see, they'll just see an unregistered device, meaning they have no opportunity to actually even try to attack my account. So very simply, the security comes from the fact that the user and the user alone has been allowed to choose a PIN for their device. That could have happened on registration, or could have been happened from an invite or some other point in time. And of course, the user can add other devices as they need. But the point is, when they choose a PIN, that PIN is for their device. So they need the PIN present, or sorry, the device present, and the user needs to know what the PIN is. And that's where your qualification is. You've got that the possession factor of the device, and you've got the knowledge factor being the PIN. But the way it looks like the user is incredible.
So this is the PIN that you're putting in though is matching with a lot of tech in the background to know the device with the PIN.
Yeah, we can definitely go into the cryptography, but suffice it to say that the PIN is being used only locally. In such a way that we're giving up absolutely no information on the user or the device. There's no way that any of the information flows can be intercepted. There's no way they can be replayed. So attacks like man in the middle or a replay won't work. But importantly, because it's proper multi-factor, something like a phishing attack won't work. What you'll see as an example, when I log in here, my PIN is always 1245. But think about that. You know what my ID, demo@miracle.com is. You know the PIN is 1245. What do you do with it? So I could phish as an attacker, I could phish all that information from somebody, but the attacker would have nothing to use it on. And that also applies for things like credential stuffing. Now that's actually one of the biggest attacks we've seen recently, DraftKings, 65,000 accounts or whatever, and a whole bunch of other guys like that. Or password spraying, which is a related and very similar sort of attack. Those attacks also won't work at all because they just don't even have the opportunity.
Brilliant. Sign me up. So unless there's any other questions or comments, what we want to leave you with now is we are going to be at ICE next week. If you'd like to see this in action or be able to discuss how this might work for your platform, do get in touch at info@miracle.com. We have a myriad of other resources. Rob was just on the G3 Newswire podcast yesterday, and we're really pleased today to launch actually a UX report at miracle.com/UX report. There it is, to go ahead and check out how this works a little bit more, how people hate it when their login experience is a poor one, and how it affects the rest of their feelings about your brand and how it gets in the way. And also, feel free to reach out with any other questions. But thank you, Michael. Thank you, Rob. Have a good day.
I guess the main question, who's going to win the Super Bowl, right? Chiefs or Eagles?
Well, if you know, then I'm going to go put it in a good bet in one of our client sites. Anyways, Anyway, that was a poor ending, but thank you everyone for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Great.
And get in touch if we
Cheers.
can help further.
Thanks a lot.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.